Lee had become used to distance. For the past 4 years, he worked 300 kilometers away from home, away from his wife, his son, and the small house where the porch light was always left on for him. It wasn't an easy arrangement, but the job paid well, and the weekend routine gave him something to look forward to. Friday evening drives had become a part of his life, and each week he set off with the same quiet determination. Finish work, get in the car, and head home to the people who mattered most. The route home was familiar, etched into his memory by repetition. Rather than taking the long looping highway, Lee preferred a shorter road that cut through the mountains in a dense stretch of forest. It shaved nearly an hour off the trip, and, after more than 100 times through it, he could almost drive it with his eyes closed. That Friday was no different, at first. It was just past 5:30 p.m. when he left work. The sun was dipping low behind the hills, and the sky was beginning to bruise with evening shadows by the time he reached the forested mountain road. As always, the air was cooler there, heavy with the scent of pine and damp soil. His favorite playlist hummed softly through the speakers as the trees blurred past his windows. At 7:30 p.m., it was just getting dark. The road narrowed ahead, winding through the thickest part of the forest. Lee squinted at the tree line. There, just for a moment, something moved. A shadow, almost human-shaped, standing motionless beside a gnarled tree. Then, without warning, a man stepped out of the darkness and hurled something across the road. It happened fast, metal glinting in the low light as a chain or spike strip landed directly in Lee's path. The kind you only ever saw in police chases on TV. Instinct took over. Lee yanked the steering wheel to the side, heart leaping into his throat. The car swerved violently, tires screaming as he tried to avoid the trap. But he wasn't quick enough. He felt the rear of the car jolt as one tire exploded in a thunderous bang. The vehicle shuddered, but Lee didn't stop. He knew in a heartbeat that stopping could be a mistake he wouldn't live to regret. Something about the shadowy figure, the deliberate sabotage. It was no prank. This was a setup, and he wasn't alone. In his rearview mirror, he caught a glimpse of movement. 3, maybe 4 men, stepping onto the road, watching him. One of them lifted an arm, pointing, almost casually. Lee floored the accelerator. The engine roared as the front-wheel drive car surged forward, dragging the damaged rear tire behind like a wounded animal. The sound of the ruined rubber grinding against the tar was deafening. Sparks flew in his side mirror. He gritted his teeth, pushing the car harder, ignoring the pull and the tremble in the frame. His hands were tight on the wheel, white-knuckled. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. The road twisted and dipped, flanked by black trees that seemed to lean in closer the faster he went. Each curve was a gamble. One mistake, and he could end up in a ditch, or worse. But after 20 grueling minutes, he saw it. Lights. A tiny settlement emerged from the darkness like a lifeboat in the ocean. Just a cluster of 10 or so houses, their porches glowing with warm light. A few people sat outside, chatting, smoking, watching the night roll in. Their peaceful world was miles away from what Lee had just escaped. He pulled in, the car groaning as it came to a stop. The rear tire was destroyed, rubber shredded, the rim gleaming where it had scraped raw against the road. His legs felt weak as he stepped out. The people on the porches looked over curiously but said nothing. They didn't ask why a man in a dust-covered car with a flat tire had come barreling into their street like a bat out of hell. Perhaps they didn't want to know. Perhaps they already did. Under a dim streetlight, Lee replaced the tire with the spare he'd barely ever used. His hands trembled slightly, but he kept working. He didn't call the police. What would he tell them? That someone tried to trap him on an isolated forest road? That strangers stepped out of the woods like ghosts? No one would believe it. Maybe not even him, if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes. With the spare tire fitted, Lee thanked the silent onlookers with a nod and got back in his car. The rest of the drive was uneventful, though he couldn't shake the feeling that something was following him in the dark, just out of sight, just behind the bend. He made it home by midnight. His wife was waiting at the door, his son already asleep. The porch light glowed gently, as always. He didn't say much that night, just held his wife a little longer, kissed his son on the forehead while he slept, and sat in the quiet kitchen with a cup of tea long after everyone else had gone to bed. The next week, when Friday came, Lee packed his bag, checked his car, and got on the road again. But this time, he stayed on the main highway, the long way home. He never took the mountain road again. Allie had always been a creature of habit. She worked as a graphic designer at a small agency, and most nights, she'd finish her shift around 8 p.m. and head home to her parents' house. The drive was routine, predictable, until tonight. The clock read 10 p.m. when Allie wrapped up her work. She sent a quick text to her dad. On my way home. Her dad, a man of steady habits, always waited for her to get home before he'd go to bed. He'd been doing that since she was a teenager. He didn't mind. It was their routine. But tonight was different. As Allie drove out of the city, the road that she usually took, familiar, well-lit, and direct, was blocked off due to a landslide. She cursed under her breath. The only other route was a lonelier, more dangerous road that wound through desert terrain, a road she had avoided for years. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel as she turned onto it. This would take longer. 90 minutes instead of 45. It was already late. As she drove into the dark, there was no moonlight to offer comfort. The stars above seemed cold and distant, and the desert stretched out on either side like a vast empty sea. The road ahead was a narrow strip of asphalt that seemed to disappear into the blackness. The headlights of her car barely made a dent in the oppressive darkness. About halfway through the drive, Allie dialed her dad's number. "Dad, it's me," she said, her voice shaky despite her efforts to stay calm. "The usual road is closed. I'm on the desert road." Her dad's voice came through the speaker, gruff but reassuring. "Stay careful, Allie. Keep me posted." "I will," she replied, hanging up. She looked out at the road again, feeling her pulse quicken. There was something unnerving about driving alone out here. This road known for its violent incidences in the past. The emptiness seemed to swallow up all sound, except the hum of her engine. But then she saw them. A small group of men stood by the side of the road, near the edge of the darkness. Their faces were hidden, but their figures were silhouetted by the weak light from her car. They didn't move, didn't seem to notice her at first. Her stomach nodded as she passed them, keeping her eyes on the road ahead. She had no intention of slowing down. Minutes passed. Then it happened. A sharp pull to the left. Allie's steering wheel jerked suddenly, pulling her off course. Her heart raced as she fought to control the car. She slammed her foot on the brake, pulling over to the side of the road. The sound of metal scraping against the asphalt was loud, grating. Panic flooded her system. The headlights were the only thing cutting through the thick, pitch-black darkness. She looked down. There was a flat tire. No, worse than that. Her tire had hit something metal, something sharp, and it was torn. She cursed under her breath, trying to calm herself as her hands trembled on the wheel. With no other option, Allie grabbed her phone and called her dad. "Dad," she gasped. There's a flat. I think I hit something. I'm in the middle of nowhere." "Stay calm, Allie," her dad interrupted. His voice was measured, but there was an edge of concern in it. "I want you to do exactly as I say. I'm coming. First, share your GPS location with me. Then, leave the car and walk about 100 yards into the bushes. Don't play with your phone and make sure it's on silent. Understand? Do it now. I'll be there soon." There was a click as he hung up. Allie hesitated, but then her instincts kicked in. She followed his orders, heart racing as she texted her location and quickly slipped out of the car. The air was cold, dry, and eerie. The desert seemed to press in on her, a vast nothingness in every direction. She moved toward the thickest clump of bushes she could find and ducked down, curling into a ball behind the thorny shrubbery. She silenced her phone, holding it tightly in her hand, trying not to make a sound. Every rustle of the wind made her flinch. Minutes dragged by, stretching into what felt like hours. Allie's breath was shallow, her body stiff with tension. The darkness around her seemed to pulse. The silence was deafening. Then, she heard the car. A low rumble. A set of headlights cut through the night. She held her breath. The car rolled past her hiding spot and came to a stop near her vehicle. The engine died. The sound of car doors opening and closing reached her ears. 3 men emerged. They moved quickly, their shadows sharp and purposeful in the glow of the headlights. Allie held her breath, praying they wouldn't see her. She could barely make out their faces, but the way they moved, quick, coordinated, made her stomach twist with fear. They went straight to her car, rifling through it, checking the glove compartment, the seats, the trunk. What did they want? Her mind raced. Were they thieves? Were they looking for something? She tried to stay as still as possible, her heart pounding in her chest. Her phone was silent in her hand, her fingers wrapped tightly around it. She felt a wave of nausea, but forced herself to hold it together. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the men seemed to reach some kind of conclusion. They exchanged harsh words, and the sound of their voices was faint but unsettling. Frustration hung in the air. One of them glanced around, scanning the darkness. Then, just as suddenly as they had arrived, they got back into their car. The engine roared to life, and the headlights cut through the night as they sped away, leaving only the faintest trace of dust behind. Allie waited. She didn't dare move. The desert air felt thick, suffocating. Then, after a long, agonizing minute, she heard it. A loud rumble. The unmistakable sound of her dad's truck, his old pickup roaring toward her. The headlights swept across the horizon, cutting through the night. Allie's heart skipped a beat. She almost cried out, but she forced herself to stay hidden. The truck came closer, its bright lights blinding in the dark. It slowed and pulled up beside her car. The door swung open, and her dad's voice, gruff but familiar, called out to her. "Allie, are you okay?" Relief washed over her, and she stumbled out of the bushes, running to him. Her dad's arms wrapped around her in a tight embrace. She felt the tension drain from her body. "I'm okay, Dad," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm okay." They drove her car to nearby bush, just to make it harder to see. "We'll come back for the car tomorrow at daylight," her father muttered. They didn't speak much on the drive home. There was no need for words. Allie had always felt safe with him. And tonight, she realized just how much she relied on that safety.